You talked about experiencing massive growth that you could not handle, and everybody says, okay, yeah, it's a nice problem, but as you mentioned, when you have the problem, it's a huge problem. What were the implications of it, and how did you try to build a more, let's say, anti-fragile, resilient product? And was it possible? Because like, how do you anticipate growth, and how don't like, what is the when are you over engineering being prepared for growth versus when are you maybe not prepared enough, and where's the sweet spot while building a product?
That's a really good question. It changes from company to company and product to product, right? Like I am a pretty lousy engineer, right? I am not a trained engineer. I haven't written a line of code in probably a decade, right? But when we were building Foursquare, I was using my PHP magic and my if-else statements and my MySQL database, and we built something that worked enough to get the point across, but it was ultimately unscalable. And, it was good enough to get us where we needed, which was, get the product out there, get people's awareness, get a first round of funding. And then we ended up hiring folks to help us rebuild it. And we really had to build the whole thing from scratch, right? Like that's the trade-off there. Like we moved very quickly with total disregard for how to build things properly. And then we suffered the consequences of that later. And thankfully, we had a great team of engineers that would help us do that. But yeah, what was the question? I didn't answer the question, but
The balance between preparing for growth and building the product in a resilient way, and like over engineering for like being prepared for that, and like being not prepared.
yeah, I don't know if there's any way to be prepared. You just kind of do the best that you can to keep the thing going, right? And I think that's the that's the struggle of the startup, right? It's like when you start this company, you have a whiteboard, and the whiteboard has your path to total world domination in 10 steps. And you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to go through the 10 steps, and then we're going to make it, and it's going to be awesome. What you don't realize is that like in between step 1 and step 2, the whole thing falls apart. And in between step 2 and step 3, the whole thing falls apart. And, like you're just constantly putting out fires everywhere from, technical fires or personnel fires or growing or scaling the company or, dealing with competitors or dealing with a screw up along the way. And so like, it's not a straight line from like, hey, we made a prototype and now let's go all the way to the vision. It's like, okay, we made the prototype. We have to deal with all of the drama in between, and hopefully we will make it to the end where the vision is realized. But I think that's the thing you never really anticipate, is how quickly you get knocked off roadmap because of stuff happens. And it's like your ability to deal with the stuff while still, keeping an eye on that roadmap and keeping an eye on that North Star and keeping the thing moving forward, that I think ultimately determines like, is it a successful story or not?